barrier being broken, a new era beginning. I spent much of the day with my 8-year-old friend Lily, who was so excited about the news the evening might bring. I was looking forward to watching history in the making alongside this fierce and excited young girl. Now I'll be honest with you, I have voted in 6 presidential elections. In half of them, the candidate I supported won, and in the other half, the candidate I supported lost. But you know, this election is different. As a person of faith, as a woman called by God to preach the good news, I cannot stand silent in the wake of this particular campaign season and election. There are so many parts of me that have reacted to what happened on November 8th. As a woman, I am demoralized because a woman who ran for president and has been a public servant for 30 years has been smeared and systematically torn down since the very beginning, and those tactics worked, and she lost. She was talked over and interrupted and demeaned and bullied on the national stage, an experience that frankly almost every woman has had to endure her entire life. And the one who treated her that way was rewarded. As a person of peace, I am frightened. I heard people promising violence if the election went the other way, and acts of violence have already been reported on both sides in the wake of Tuesday night. As an ally of those in the LGBTQ community, I am heartbroken as I hear the anguish in the voices of many. As a granddaughter of a Mexican immigrant, I am angry that my family members were described so hatefully. As a participant in interfaith dialogue, I am worried that all members of Islam are being labeled as potential terrorists. And as a pastor of Brentwood Christian Church who works for inclusion and extravagant hospitality, I am devastated that exclusion and inhospitality seem to rule the day. As a human being who strives every day, to see the humanity of those who think differently than me, I am challenged to understand why people voted the way they did. We are a nation divided, but we are not divided because of who won the presidency. No, our division started long before that. And I wonder if that's what makes it so hard. For months we have been aching for this election to be over so we could go back to some sense of normalcy, where we could go back to just being neighbors and friends and families and no longer enemies. But I think this election may have broken us. I have heard it from many people across the generations. Never have we been so divided. And we would have been just as divided if the election had gone the other way. Because as a nation, we have failed to listen to one another. We failed to recognize ourselves in the other. We have demonized those who think differently and act differently and vote differently. While for many, a vote for Donald Trump did not equate to a vote for racism, xenophobia, and hate, it did equate to that for some. A member of our church, while sitting in a waiting room on the Wednesday morning after the election, heard a man say to his wife, "Well, thank God Trump is now president. He's going to get rid of all the blacks, homosexuals, Jews, and terrorists, and we'll get our country back." I know I have family members who voted differently than I did. But I'm not willing to cut any of them out of my life for doing so. And I know that I am coming from a place of privilege being able to say that, because I am a straight, cisgender, white woman with health insurance whose status in this nation most likely will not change under a Trump presidency. But I am an ally of many groups of people who cannot say that with 100% certainty. And I hear you, and I ache with you. It's important for me to listen to the stories of those who voted differently than me, the stories of those who are struggling to make ends meet, who no longer have jobs available to them now that benefits like health insurance and sick days, whose communities have crumbled due to closing manufacturing plants, who feel betrayed by Washington every step of the way and just wanted something to change. People vote the way they do for a myriad of reasons, and we need to listen to each other. But right now, no one is leaving space for those who may think or vote differently than they do. People are unfriending family and friends left and right, refusing to be in the same room as those they once loved. I can't help but think that many of these bold declarations I'm seeing are tantamount to cutting off one's nose to spite one's face, because let's face it, we are all living in this country together. Most of us aren't going to leave because of how this election turned out. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters or perish together as fools. But how can we ever begin to do that when the wounds are so deep? We are a broken and divided electorate, and right now it feels like healing may not be possible. As a minister, I often turn to the Bible, where we find people crying out to God in the face of injustice, in the midst of distress, when the people are downtrodden and broken and devastated. The great prophets raised their voices against the powers that be, that held the people under the heel of their boot. The prophet Isaiah preached to a broken people, a people living in exile, a people who had lost hope. And he reminded them of God's work in this world, of God's dream for God's people, a new heaven and a new earth where there will be no more weeping, no cries of distress, no lives cut short by disease or famine or poverty or war, where all will have housing and food to eat, where work will bring dignity and life, and all will be blessed. The people of Israel needed a word from Isaiah, this reminder that God had a dream for them and that what they were living at that moment was not it. They needed to hear that God is the God of justice, the God of the poor, the God of the marginalized, the God of the voiceless, the God of the weary. In the wake of this election, as I wonder what the future holds for us as a nation, I've heard segments of Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise, running through my head, a refrain lifting the fog of my despair. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I am a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. We will rise. People of color and people of all gender identities, people of varying sexual orientations, and people of all socioeconomic levels, we will join hands together and we will rise. People of all ethnicities and people of all faiths, people with power and people with none, we will join hands together and we will rise. People of justice and people of love, people of hope and people of courage, we will join hands together and we will rise. We are called to listen to one another, to see the humanity of each person, and to treat them with dignity, so we will rise. We are called to speak out when we see injustice, to stand on the side of the oppressed, to feed and clothe and visit and care for and welcome the least of these, so we will rise. We are called to work together to live into this dream for all people, so we will rise. It starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with all of us, and we will rise. So before you make an assumption about somebody because of who they voted for, stop for a moment and imagine what it's like to be in their shoes. Imagine the fear of not being able to provide for your family. Imagine the reality of not having any good jobs in your community anymore. Imagine the anger at broken promises by politician after politician. Imagine the fear of having your marriage dissolved through no actions of your own. Imagine the terror of hearing that a powerful leader doesn't want to allow members of your faith into our country. Imagine the anguish of hearing your child cry because they believe they are going to be sent back to Mexico. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Listen to them speak with the intent to hear their story rather than with the intent to formulate a response. And then join hands with them together so that we can rise. We have hard work to do, and our work starts here. And to those of you who are living in very real fear right now because of campaign promises that were made and now have the potential of being realized, know that you have so many gathered here in this space right now who will stand by you, who will help you, who will rise up with you. We will stand beside you and love you through it all. And we will fight for you. It is our calling as a community to make sure it includes you. To show you through our words and our work that you are not alone and that you are loved beyond your wildest imagination. We won't let anyone in power leave you behind or strip you of the rights you fought so hard to get. The call of justice will not let us stay silent. The call of God demands that we speak, propels us to act, and moves us to love. Together, we will rise.